Okay, so Howard, can you just confirm that you guys can hear me now?
Yes, we hear you fine, and we see your screen.
Great, so it should be in full view now.
It is.
Yes. So we'll just kick things off. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the May Team Studio TLCC webinar. Thank you for joining us today, as we also welcome our guest speakers, Paul Withers and Mike McGarel, who will be presenting on 12 tasks made easier with IBM Domino Xpages. My name is Talene Bedrosian. I'm the marketing director at Team Studio, and I'm joined today with, by Howard Greenberg and Paul Delanetia of TLCC, and of course, Paul and Mike, our presenters. So on the agenda today, I'll be taking a few moments to tell you about Team Studio, who we are, what we do. I'll then be passing the controls to Howard at TLCC so he can do the same, and then we'll get to Paul and Mike to dive right in. Before we get started, a few administrative things to cover. We have over 400 attendees today. To protect your privacy, the attendee list is not public, so on the attendee list you might only see yourself, but you're in great company. You're all muted during the session, so participation will be through the chat window and the Q&A panel. We're doing Q&A at the end of the session, and the Q&A panel is where you should ask all of your questions. And you're welcome to ask your questions at any point, but as I mentioned, we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded, and the link will be sent to you in a follow-up email later this week. And then I also wanted to reiterate, go back to this first slide here. If you hear anything you like, feel free to mention us on Twitter. All of our Twitter handles are listed there, Team Studio, TLCC, Paul, and Mike as well. So getting into a brief background about Team Studio. Team Studio may have assisted you in the past with application development. We've been delivering innovative developer tools and developer productivity tools to the Notes and Domino community since 1996, specializing in source code control, version management, and source code management. So we've recently moved into the mobile application area back in 2010 with our Unplugged platform. Unplugged gives you the ability to extend your Notes application out to mobile devices, so also something new to check out if you haven't done so already. A little bit more about Unplugged. As I mentioned, you're able to extend your application to mobile devices. The unique thing about Unplugged is that it leverages the powerful technology of Xpages and provides a native app experience for the user, and these apps have the capability to function when offline, which can definitely come in handy. We're very proud to have been the recipient of the IBM Collaboration Solution Award at the Connect conference earlier this year, and the Unplugged product is available on the major mobile platforms, BlackBerry, Android, and iOS. So in addition to Unplugged as a platform, which allows clients to create custom mobile applications that meet their own specs, we've recently produced an application which is a hosted solution, and it's a production-ready application for business continuity. Continuity allows users to import their plans and crisis emergency plans, call tree, and some other really cool features. These are all imported directly into the mobile device, and this information is available to them if connectivity becomes compromised. So all information is available offline. Team Studio Continuity also works on all the major platforms, as does Unplugged. So that's a little bit about our products. We're available to give demos, and obviously none of that will be done today, but if you'd like one, please feel free to reach out in the chat session or the Q&A panel of this webinar. So just a few notes here about some things coming up. Our next webinar with TLCC will be in June. This will be on Dojo Grids and Xpages. It'll be on June 27th, and it's already available for you to sign up either from the Team Studio webinar page on WebEx or through the TLCC free webinar page. And we're very active in supporting the user group activities that take place in our community. So we'll be at MWLUG this year in Indianapolis, and that's August 21 through 23. So hopefully you'll come out and see us there. So next, I'd like to pass the presentation on to Howard so he can talk a little bit about TLCC. So Howard, just give me 1 second and I'll give you presenter right here. You can take control.
Okay, thank you, Talene.
All right, should be all set.
Okay, let me just share my slide here. Hopefully you're seeing the title screen.
I see it. I see your screen.
Okay, great. Well, Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're calling from. Today we got two great speakers that I'll introduce in a minute. I think you're really going to enjoy today's presentation. Both myself and Paul Delanebbia, my partner here at TLCC, will be acting as host. As Twain mentioned, our next webinar is with Brad. I'm going to mispronounce your name, Brad Balsitis. And it's going to be based on a series that he's been doing on his blog about the Dojo data grid and using that in Xpages. So it should be real interesting and highly suggest it as a way to kind of broaden your horizons and get out of using the view panel to display your Domino data and be able to have some new and unique ways to display your data. You can sign up at that link. These slides will be sending out after the webinar, so you'll have these links available. And a little bit about TLCC before we get started. We currently have 7 Xpages courses. The first one here is a great price. It's free, and this is good for people just getting started with Xpages. It's about a 2-hour course. And then we have a number of other courses. Some of these are available for Domino 9 now. We have actually 4 of these courses available for Domino 9 in addition to the 8.5 versions. Our newest course is the Rapid Xpages Development course. That's been very popular because it shows you how to use some of the controls that are in the extension library in 8.5 and in the built right into Domino Designer 9 to build a really good user interface quickly. So this has been a really popular course, and suggest take a moment to take a look at it. All our courses are self-paced. You learn anywhere, but we do provide help via a discussion database that's integral into every course. And we also can come on site and do private classes or do private classes via the web. And we also provide mentoring services too, where we help our students implement what they've learned on their own projects. Helene mentioned the MW Lug. That is, if you're not aware of this, it's in Indianapolis in August, and it's sort of free. It's $35 to register. That's basically free in my book for all the great training you're going to get over 3 days. Another good event coming up is what used to be called UK Lug. It's going to be held in Brighton this year. It's in the south of the UK. And it's September 1st and 2nd. This is totally free. And that's another great event. There's a lot of good speakers. I know that they're planning on getting to speak. And at both events, TLCC will be featuring what's called a Tackathon. We did this at the IM Lug event. We had 16 people, and we went through that course I mentioned before, the Rapid Xpages Development course, kind of a one-day overview of that content. And then the participants got to keep the course, which was an $899 course. They got to keep that, and they still get the instructor support, and it's only $499 for a day of training. So if you're going to MW Lug or you're going to Icon UK, check out those Tackathons. Those are available. The links are at the site there. It's a great day of training for, as I said, a really low price. Okay, so Twain mentioned the Q&A. In the ribbon at the top of your screen with the WebEx interface, you'll see a Q&A button. If you don't see that button, to the right is a drop-down arrow, and you can click on that and choose the Q&A. And what you'll do then get is this panel that I'm showing here where you can ask the questions. So don't ask, there also is a chat panel. Don't ask questions in there. We're going to use the Q&A panel for questions, and at the end we'll go through your questions and get some answers from Mike and Paul. Okay, so let me introduce Mike and Paul. Mike is actually not, I know many of the folks we've had in the webinars have been business partners, but Mike's actually a corporate developer, just like many of you. He works for a company called Sarnowski, and they're an exhibit services company that provides all the needed background, all the needed technologies and things like that for trade shows. Mike is also the developer for the MWLUG website, and also the SkiLug, which unfortunately they didn't have this year, website. And Mike's been working with Notes and Domino since version 4.6. Paul Withers is an IBM champion for the last couple of years. He also co-hosts the XCast series, and he's also the co-author of the Xpages Extension Library book, which I bet many of you have sitting on your desk right now. And if you don't, you might want to consider getting it. It's a great reference book for the numerous controls that are in the extension library. Paul works for Intech, which is a big Domino business partner in the UK. And he's joining us from the UK too. Another project that Paul's working on, and maybe at the end, if we get time, Paul can speak about it, is that a group of developers under the OpenNTF umbrella are building a Java APIs to replace the Java APIs that IBM provides. And these are going to fix a lot of the issues that are in the IBM APIs, which are kind of outdated. So maybe Paul will have a few minutes to speak about that at the end. So let me get started with our presentation. Let me switch control over to Paul. Okay, Paul, you should be passing your presenter privileges. And I think, Mike, you were the first speaker, right?
Yes, I am. First off, welcome, everybody. And I'm waiting for the information to show up on the screen. But one of the things that we wanted to address is why, if you're used to Notes and Domino, especially if you do a lot of work with classic Domino, the purpose of the session is to show you why you'd want to move to Xpages if you haven't already. How much easier your life will be once you start using Xpages. And things that are difficult or nearly impossible in Domino become much easier with Xpages just because of the things that are built in. And we're going to go through a dozen of them right now, and a few more. We'll toss in some other things too as we're talking, because there's so much with Xpages that makes things so much better.
And Paul, are you in the process of sharing your screen? I guess you're.
This is the other Paul. Paul doesn't have you. Paul, also, you're going to want to unmute yourself as well.
Yeah. One thing I can mention, what Xpages is really good for is faster web development, because so many things are built in. It's much easier to provide a modern Web 2.0 interface. There's a lot more pre-built controls in there, so you don't have to do a lot of things yourself. UI, the user interface can be separated from the business logic much easier. There's a lot more flexibility with the development interface. It allows you to implement Java a lot easier, and Java, that's a whole separate topic, but Java is really the direction that IBM is going, and if you want to stick with IBM technologies, that really is the direction that you should be moving. And it's a lot easier to extend Xpages and add more things to it and tie in other platforms to Xpages. But the big question is, what's in it for you, and that's the point of the session. So we hope that you see that it is easier for you to use Xpages than classic development and the Notes client.
Paul Withers, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah. And have you found the interface to share your screen as well?
No.
It is elusive. You might see a share menu at the top of the WebEx window.
No, I'm not seeing the. WebEx menu at the moment.
Control D will share your desktop, Paul.
Control Alt D.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, did something.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're seeing the slides now.
It's just coming up, I think.
Ah, yes.
There we go.
Ah, there we go.
Got it. We got the Hercules slide.
Yes.
Yeah. Good job on stretching there, Mike.
Well, there's so much to talk about with Xpages that you just, it's easy. It's easy just to keep going because it is such a great thing to learn and it's such a great thing to use.
Okay, I'm going to get off now. I'll leave it to you too.
Right, so just a bit of background if you don't know about Hercules. He was probably the most famous Greek hero, known as Heracles in the Greek, but Hercules in the Latinized form. And he was given 12 labors as punishment, and that's why we're covering 12 labors here.
Except they're not labors. Things are easy.
No, no, they're anything but labors in Xpages. So the first one that we'll jump onto is the Nemean lion, and this it was a lion that was terrorizing the environment around where Hercules lived, and it was particularly troublesome because it had an invulnerable skin, and so it couldn't be killed by conventional weapons. So Hercules throttled the lion and then somehow took off his skin. So that's the link for this one.
Yeah, and skin is for user interfaces. That's a term that's often used for interface the way it looks. So the first thing we're going to talk about in terms of the skin is what Xpages calls themes, and themes are what tie in. They tie in user interface, the look, and it's a way to add in also scripts. It's a way to keep things together and keep things consistent within an application. And we're going to have a good example of that here in terms of the page here. So we have a help request database here. We have a demo here, and this is what this is kind of the default theme. It's the green theme right here. All right. So this is a sample the way it is, and this comes with Xpages, so it gives you the green bar and highlights with the green menu here. But suppose you want something a little bit different, and suppose you have a form you want a little bit different. You can click the gold theme. And is a sample here. So you see this, you have this request, and now you have a form. So we have the form here, and we changed a little bit, so now it's gold. So this was very easy. A lot of this was built in, all right? But since we're talking to Hercules, and maybe he wants this help request because he gets a lot of requests from people. He was always helping people. So he wants his own he wants a different look. He wants more of a Greco-Roman look, maybe something with a 2-column format. So that's what we have here. We have here the 2 columns with again, we have, the menus look a little different, but things are there. And so you could really change the look very easily with a theme.
Yeah, so going back to the slides, as we can see, themes can contain both style sheets and JavaScript files. They can inherit from other themes, and it just helps create a standard UI across your whole server, potentially.
Right. Yeah, you can put the theme on the server, put it into whatever application you want, so it keeps things consistent. And everything's in one place, so it's easy to make changes and have it go across application-wide or server-wide. And it makes your code faster because you don't have to put styles within within the database or within the pages. Right. There's a couple gotchas though, as we say here. Since it's added last, the theme is loaded last on the page. If you have scripts, if you have loading scripts that depend on a JavaScript file that's in the theme, it won't load. So you got to put the JavaScript files in somewhere else, maybe in a custom control, which we'll talk about later, or right on the page. And if you load something only when the page loads, so which you'll see in your source code with the $, as opposed to the £, which means it's computed every time, then the theme won't override that. Once it's loaded, it's going to stay there. But I use themes all the time, and I find them very helpful, and they make the coding time much more efficient.
Yeah, so here's a bit of sample code. So here we're setting a star for all submit buttons across the whole application, importing a CSS style sheet in the theme. So it allows some quite sophisticated functionality to be implemented system-wide.
Okay, and we did the demo, so next one.
So the next one, Hercules' second label was the Linnean Hydra, which was a water monster, which showing on the right here with started off with 9 heads. So Hercules went in and just chopped off a head, and unfortunately 2 grew back in its place. So that kind of dynamic reproduction of content kind of fits very nicely into repeat controls. So repeat controls, for developers who are starting off with Xpages, the usual way of doing views would be to just drag a view panel on. Brad's going to talk next time about the Dojo data grid. But if you want greater flexibility, then that's where repeat controls really come in. They're not hugely different to standard view panels. You set the data source, but unlike a view panel, it can be more than just a Domino view. It can be a notes document collection, a notes view entry collection, a multi-value field, any kind of Java collection. So anything that's really a collection of objects. Then you set a number of times for it to iterate. So as with a view panel, by default that's 30, but you can set that. And you set a var property, which if you've ever added your own content into a view panel, you do exactly the same thing. You set a variable from which to reference a single iteration in the template that you set up for it. So in terms of comparisons to traditional Domino for the web, historically you'd probably have outputted HTML with @transform or created a web view and put all of your HTML into there. That's okay, but it can get quite complex quite quickly. It's also easier to build up than a LotusScript agent. You can create part of the repeat control, test it, add another component in, test it. It's much easier to test and to find out where things are going wrong. And it has huge flexibility, as we've seen with the data model. There is a bit of a gotcha that it doesn't show content if it's single string, although I think there's something that handles that now in one of the XSP.properties since 8.5.3. So that's just something to be aware of if your return value could return just a single value if it's a lookup to a keyword document, for example. So let's have a look at a demo for that. So here I've got a view panel, standard view panel that's showing people in the company. So that looks okay, but if you use a repeat control to use business cards, then we're adding some real interactive, some real enhanced UI to it, and it's showing the same content. But you can also nest repeats. So here we've got the standard way that might have been done with a categorized view. It's okay, but categorized views don't particularly work well on the web. So instead, have a drop-down of departments, and then grouping those people in those departments based upon their site. We can see the business card format again, and it's a much more powerful look and feel to it. So that's starting to really enhance the usability compared to a view panel. So repeat controls are certainly something to look at. So the third label was the Cairnian hind. This was a deer that was very quick, and that fits in with in-view edit. In-view edit can be done in the Notes client. You could code it in Domino in the web as well, but in Xpages it's much easier. So here I've got the department in sight. I can double-click on the department, change it, and it's saved back to the document. Double-click and change it back. So let's just have a quick look at how that's being done. So what I'm actually doing is, when you break it down, is not particularly complex. So I'll just increase my font size a little bit here. So first thing that I'm doing before the page loads, I'm setting a viewscope variable editable to blank. That's just so that it's not null. And then on that department column, instead of showing just the column value, I'm showing a label. And that label, the read-only version, is rendered if viewscope.editable doesn't include the current documents unit. MyDoc is the variable for the repeat control. So on the data table that I'm using here, data table is just a variant of the repeat control with a bit less flexibility. It's a standard tabular layout, but I'm referring referring to each element as MyDoc. So in each row, sorry about that, in each row I'm referring to MyDoc and getting the department column. And on the label I'm setting an on double click, and on the double click I'm setting viewscope.editable to the document ID and the department. I've then got the combo box, which is rendered if viewscope.editable does include the current document ID. And then in the on change, I'm storing the value back into the department field, saving it, and clearing viewscope.editable. And we've also got an on blur event. If the user just clicks out of that field, it clears viewscope.editable as well. So when you double click, it's showing the combo box. If we just click out of it, then it's showing the label again. So it's something that's fairly simple, but it's very flexible, and you can take that even further with the extension library with the in-place form as well. Just bear in mind that Notes XSP view entry is read-only, so you can't reference the column when you're binding. You have to reference the field of the underlying document because only the underlying document is editable. And for new documents, it's worth setting the scope to request where possible, so that at the end of the save, that document data source is cleared from memory, so you're not re-editing the same document each time. You're actually creating a brand new one.
Oh, and I also want to mention that there's there's a brain shift that you're kind of showing in the code where things are shown if you kind of display things if they're rendered or not. So it's a show when instead of a hide when throughout all of Xpages, which to me makes things a lot easier to use just in general. Because
yeah, until you go back to until you go back to doing a hide when and code it the wrong way around.
Well, okay, yeah. Very true. All right.
Right, so the fourth labor was the Erymanthian boar, and this was a creature which was very hard to track down because it just hid away all the time. So that fits in with
the design properties. A lot of elements, the properties of these elements, what's doing what where, is very difficult to find in classical Domino, especially because you could have JavaScript code in half a dozen different places. You could have inline styles in several different places. You're not really sure where things are. But with Xpages, it gives you a design properties box where everything's collected in the same place. And you could do everything there, including compute information or put in static values. So it's all in one location, makes it very easy to find. We have a nice screenshot here with just labeling things. It shows you how there's the navigator on the left, and just shows you the different properties that can come up within that properties box. And there's the common ones are on the top, and then there's an all properties, which just lists everything, and that you could use to put your values in there. So it's very handy. It makes things much easier, so you don't have to go looking all over the place. And just the fact that almost all properties can be computed, it makes it a lot more flexible, makes it more dynamic for a lot of things. So you can really control what the user sees and help them out so they could see what you want at the right time. It makes it much easier to program the user interface.
Yes, just the gotcha there is that event handler properties like the onStart, the onComplete, they're not accessible from the component itself. The easiest way to access those is to either go to the outline or to the source pane, click on the event handler, and then in the properties pane you see the properties that are specific for that event handler. So the fifth label was the Augean stables. The Augeas, the owner of the stables, wasn't very good at mucking out his horses, so they were absolutely filthy, so the task for Hercules was to clear out those stables. And he agreed with Augeas. He made a bet with him that he could actually clear the stables in a single day. It wasn't just a few stables. We're talking about lots and lots of stables, the kind of number of horses that probably rivals Godolphin these days. But Hercules had a plan. He went to a nearby river, cut a channel, and redirected the river straight through the stables and cleared them with plenty of time to sit down and code an Xpages app before the end of the day. So what's very quick in Xpages? It's the Ajax partial page refresh. So Mike, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure, I could talk about this. It allows you to refresh just part of it, like the name says, just part of the page, so you don't have to send the whole page back to the server where it comes back. It's a faster user experience where you just change a certain section of the page, whatever part that needs to change. So within the code, it's doable within Domino, of course, because you could write all the script with the Ajax, but the Xpage just gives you a checkbox. You know, you just kind of say, oh, I want this, and this is the part of the page I want to change, and that's it. So it's a two-click sort of thing. You know, 2 selections and you're set. So it saves you a lot of coding time with that. And it could also save even some typos since you're clicking instead of having to type in which, you know, what your target is. Because I've done that where like you have the wrong capitalization and that's it. Your afternoon's gone as you try to figure out what's happening here. And so again, it's a lot more code with Domino. I mean, you could write the agent with all that. I mean, there's certainly samples out there. You can't do it in the Notes client. And the thing is, you got to know when things are refreshed, what's happening when, and then you really need to be aware of the Java server faces lifecycle. And there's samples of that on OpenNCF with some samples and explanations. So that's very helpful there.
Yes, the other area to look into is the Exec Mode and Exec ID, which I did some posts on at the beginning of the year on that. Just to look at that, for example, here on the combo box, it's just a case of setting these options here. What we've always had before is the option to set partial execution mode. In Domino Designer 9, you then get an option of defining which ID partial execution should run on. And partial execution, the refresh ID is determining which area of the page gets pushed back to the browser. The exec mode and exec ID is defining which part of the X page actually gets processed on the server. So if you've got a very large X page, you can really start to cut down the amount of processing. But it does have some side effects. So here we've got exec mode set on the combo box to just change the label below. But because exec mode is only running on the combo box, when I run it on the server, it's updating the combo box, but refreshing the whole of this panel. So when it's pushing the data back to the server, it's using the initial value of name, because that hasn't been updated, the initial value of age, because that hasn't been updated on the server, because exec mode is only running on this combo box. So what happens is the user loses their values. So you just need to be aware of where the exec ID area is compared to where the refresh ID area is, and make sure that you're not automatically losing all of those options. So that's just something just to be aware of for that. So the sixth labor was the Stymphalian Birds. These were a large flock of birds that were really terrorizing the local environment and the local people, because they dropped their feathers, and the feathers were sharpened like arrows, so they were killing all of the local inhabitants and the local livestock. So Hercules, his task was to get rid of them. And the way he got rid of them was by making a lot of noise and scaring them away. So that fits into.
Well, pagers. If you remember way back when, pagers used to make a lot of noise, people would carry them. But now pager has a different terminology within Xpages. They're the way to go from page to page, and this is something that was very difficult in Domino, because it's just you had to keep track of what page you're on, what's next, what's coming up there, and you're trying to move through the view. It was very difficult to code. It took a lot. Here, everything in Xpages is built in with the pager controls. You can show the page number. You have a lot of flexibility where, because you could, like you're saying, you could put on page numbers. You can format it the way you want. It could look the way you want, again, based on your theme and your styles. You can you can go to the last page, figure out where that is. It'll figure it out for you. Actually, you just say, I want to show the last page, and that's it. And it's built into a lot of design elements already, so you don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is turn it on, and it's there for you. And so it's just, and having the pager is a much better experience than the normal Notes client experience, which shows you this huge list of documents. So instead, you could just show 20 at a time, or 30, or 10, or whatever you want. Or instead of seeing as rows and rows, you could show something like we showed earlier with the pre-control, say the business cards, where you have those boxes, but it'll keep count of those boxes. You could show 10 on a page or 20 on a page. It's just much easier to move around, much easier to interact with the application. So we got a demo.
Oh. I added validation onto this page.
All right. So again, here's the page. These are two elements with two different pages on there. So we got, and these pages work within the elements. So this would be nearly impossible. I mean, you could do it with iframes and all that, but it would be a lot more difficult within classic Domino to do. And again, these pagers are just built in. You just had to turn them on. You say if you want them on the left or the right. You say how many items you want on a page, and you have your previous and next. And so this is just grabbing two different views on a page.
So the seventh labor was the Crete and bowl. The only really complex element of this was that the bowl was on Crete and wouldn't go onto a ship. So Hercules just climbed on top of it and rowed it into the sea, and it swam across, and he got it back very quickly. So that was one that was quickly taken off of his to-do list. And talking of to-do lists, this is something that Domino or that Eclipse brings to the party. With all of the standard Eclipse editors, standard Eclipse allows you to manage to-dos, both in Java and in the XML editors. So with the Xpages components that take advantage of the standard editors, like Xpages, custom controls, themes, any Java code, you can add to-dos in, and they will get picked up. Now, there isn't really any easy way of doing that in traditional Notes or Domino, but that's now available. So there are two steps for enabling to-dos. First is to actually configure in the preferences that it actually picks up those to-dos. So there are two areas under General, Editors, and Task Tags. Then you have to enable searching for task tags, and you can add new tags. So by default, to-dos will be picked up. And the other area is under the Java option to enable them for Java. And then once you clean or once you build the application, then those tags will get picked up. So if we just come across to Designer, the other area is in the Tasks view. So you just go to Window, Show Eclipse Views, Other, and just start typing tasks, and it filters them down so you can find the tasks view, and you just need to add that in. Then you go to configuring the contents. Now, by default, to-dos vanilla or to-dos are added in. I've added some additional ones elsewhere, but I've added this new one of drunk because I'm sure there is stuff that I code late at night when I've got back from the pub, and there is. Oh dear, and I better just remove this one before Mike sees it, because I don't want him realizing that I've been working with .NET. And oh, I was definitely drunk when I thought about packaging this up on OpenNTF. I definitely want to get rid of that. So when that's then built, those tags, those tasks are visible and can be removed. And in configuring the contents, you can also determine whether it's going to pick up. You probably just want any element in the same project, so it's only showing elements, it's only showing tasks for the current NSF. I think by default it's picking up on any element, so that means any NSF that you've opened that has tasks, it will show. But you can configure those contents in the same way that you can on the problems view as well. So that starts adding in a lot of power for actually managing where you are with the project. If you do something and you want to come back to it at a later date, or you want to pass it on to another developer, then you can just add a to-do in there. And you can even, if you set up a task with your name by it, then you can manage your to-do list compared to someone else's. So the 8th label was the horses of Diomedes, and these were flesh-eating horses, so it was very difficult to actually take those back to Hercules' boss, Eurystheus, safely without getting eaten by them. But as anyone who's dealt with Notes and Domino knows, you don't really want to work with Notes 8. You want to work with 8.5. So on the way back from the labours of Hercules, he rescued a young woman who was giving up her life for her husband, and he wrestled Death, who you can see over on the right-hand side of that picture, and saved her. So what we're talking about here is rescuing code.
Yes, again, because the Eclipse editor, but by the way, that is an example of scope creep. Even Hercules had to put up with that. Anyway, you can bring if you accidentally delete something or you want to see changes, you can, for comparison, you can check your local history to see what's different and maybe bring it back if you want it and you got rid of it by accident. Maybe after you came back from the pub and you're clicking around, you clicked the wrong thing. Who knows? So it's available from 8.3 and now in 9.0. You can, well, that's with the local history, but with source control management, that's even a better way to control the way to control your history, so you can get back things and go back to previous versions, compare versions, and Xpages works with different source control systems, so it's very nice. And again, the third-party products are very helpful and they're available out there, but these are built in. And they don't do, it doesn't do everything that the third-party products do, but certainly it could help you if you're in a jam and you need to find something right away. If you use DXL for elements, sometimes things might not work that well with that, so that's something to be careful about. Of course, because it's local history, if you're using that, that's specific to your computer. And there's a good demo of that here.
So one of the really nice things is that local history is working on the design element name. So I can even delete that first task, create a brand new design element, and as long as I give it the same name, can you remember what the name was, Mike?
Oops.
That's okay. I did save it. Task underscore one themes. Okay. So task underscore themes. I can go to the source pane, compare with local history. Okay. Let me just. I think that's because I hadn't actually saved it first.
Right.
So there wasn't any local history. This is where having source control is going to be helpful later on, because I've actually now lost that design element. But if I go into, let's just go into this import page and just save that, then I can compare with the local history and pull the previous version back in. So I've got it there, and I can create a brand new X page, compare with the local history. Because I had made a change to that, it's now in the local history. So from a completely blank X page, I can pull that source code back in. So even if you delete a design element as you're working on it, if you've been working on it recently, you can still get it back with local history. But source control will definitely enable you to get it back. So the 9th label was the belt of Hippolyte. Hippolyte was one of the Amazons, who were a warlike race and were very difficult to subdue. And Hercules' task was to take Hippolyte's belt, which fortunately she was very kind to hand over to him.
And a belt helps, tie everything together, and that's what custom controls do. That is sort of the design element that really helps keep your applications together, since they are reusable within cross applications or even within the same X page, depending on what kind of control it is. And a custom control is sort of is a more powerful subform. That's why I always think about it, where it could be used in multiple places, and you can put whatever you want in there, and you can have a lot more control over custom controls because you can assign properties to them. So a custom control can have different properties in different places, which is very helpful. A little demo of that. And there's a design element called an editable area that you can place within a custom control, and that area you can use to drag in other design elements or custom controls. So that could be dynamic, or it could just be different within different uses of this custom control. They're really the building blocks of an Xpages application, and they're like I say, if you're used to using a lot of subforms, then custom controls are your thing, because they will definitely they take the place of subforms, but you can do so much more with them.
Yeah, I think one of the big benefits is that if you're using subforms in classic Notes client and you want content at the top of the page and content at the bottom of the page, that's two separate subforms, and you need to put those two subforms onto each onto each form. With Xpages, you can put content you can use the editable area, have one custom control, and drop content into that will actually show up in the middle of that custom control, effectively. So you're cutting down on the number of design elements that you need to set up and manage.
Okay. Here we go. So with this custom control, we have there's same custom control. It's the buttons, the submit and cancel buttons, and there's one at the top of this form. And since it's so long, the user has to scroll down. So we want to make it easier for the user. We put same buttons on the bottom. So this is the same custom control. It's dragged. There's one on the top, one on the bottom, but there's a property to align the buttons on the right when it's on the top, and aligned in the center when it's on the bottom. And this is very nice, so that if we decide to change the color of the buttons or add another button, we just got to change one custom control. We don't have to maintain two different subforms like we would with Domino, classic Domino. So again, here's the buttons on top within the custom control, and there's the source where the control is called request buttons, and I have a property called control styles, and inside I put in the actual styles in there for the display on top, and then the other custom controls in the bottom, kind of a long form, and there it is again, the same property, control styles, but this time the text is aligned to the center instead of to the right. And so the same custom control with the two buttons show up in two different places on the same form. So it makes it much easier for the user. And the composite data is that pulls in the properties, and that's how you pull in any custom control property. It all falls into composite data, and then the control styles is what I call that particular property. So again, it's very easy to implement. It saves you, just easier to maintain. It just saves you a lot of time.
So the 10th labor was going and fetching the cattle of a monster called Geryon. Geryon, as you can see here, had 3 heads, and he had a dog with 2 heads. So when we're talking about multiple heads joined onto a single body, that kind of links in with joining views and multiple data sources. So what we're talking about here is merging content from multiple documents into a single view, merging content from even multiple databases, and being able to display and edit multiple documents on a single Xpage. Compared to traditional Domino Notes client, combining views just isn't possible unless you pull the data together with an agent and create some kind of report. The only other way is to actually store data from a related document on the current document. So you start getting a lot of duplicate data in multiple places. With Xpages, you can move away from that. You can just pull information dynamically into a view. You can pull information from another document dynamically. You can have a parent document and a child document on the same Xpage, edit them independently, edit both at the same time, even if you want. So doing that kind of thing, even on the web, could have been done with iframes, but it gives you a lot more flexibility with Xpages, and also for building up complex layouts in views. The only bit of a gotcha there is that if you're editing two documents on the same Xpage, you just need to set ignore request params for the secondary notes document, because otherwise, although you may be creating, you may think that you're creating a child document, you're actually editing the main document in the child form. So you start getting some strange results. So let's just look at an idea of those joined views. So again, I'm using the business card layout that we saw in the first repeat control, but now we're showing the holiday entitlement for that user. And that's coming from a completely different view, and it's being looked up on the fly. That holiday entitlement is on a record for that year for that person. The rest of the information is coming directly from the person document. So that looks very similar. It looks virtually the same. It doesn't look as if it's two views. So you start adding in some additional power there. But if we're talking about real power, then let's look at this. So here I'm using repeat controls, pulling from multiple areas of the database. So here I've got an @DB column, pulling up the departments. So I can click on IT, and then I've got a chart that's pulling from holiday for that department. So the first one was an @DB column from people, from the people view. Here I'm pulling from holiday view. And then I'm showing another repeat control where it's actually two repeat controls embedded within one another. So the first repeat control is pulling from the people view, the same kind of thing as we saw with the business card layout. The second one, we're pulling from the holiday, looking up on the person, the site, and the department to show that person's holiday. And we can click through to see the individual bits of information, the actual details for that person document or for the holiday document. So that's the kind of really powerful reporting kind of information that you can pull up, and you can build those up in a very granular level. So this @DB column repeat control is one custom control. I've got a second custom control for the chart and a third custom control for the area on the right, so that I can debug that very easily compared to doing the same kind of thing in an agent. And I can just create an Xpage with just this area on the right-hand side, hard code some parameters, and just double check what am I actually seeing. So it starts to become much more flexible and much more powerful than would have been done in a notes client or in web development for Domino. So the 11th labor is the apples of the Hesperides, and Hercules had to go and fetch these from the end of the world. Apple, of course, makes us think of mobile devices. And this is one of the benefits that Xpages brings. Xpages can be displayed without any additional work on your behalf on an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device as a browser. But you can then take it further to use something like responsive design, like Collaboration Today does, so that it has a different layout depending upon the size of the screen. There are extension library mobile components for taking advantage of the different screen resolution, and also things like the data view and the form layout control in the extension library. They have different renderers. So if you put a data view onto an Xpage on a mobile device, it looks completely different to how it does on a desktop browser, and that's all handled with the renderer. Xpages picks up that it's a mobile device and so throws out completely different HTML. So we've got some real power there for making it easy to develop for mobile devices. And of course, Team Studio has Unplugged, which allows you to develop a completely custom offline look and feel for Xpages, just using your Xpages skills. And just today, talking about offline and mobile, there was a project put up onto OpenNTF for looking at the discussion database and taking that offline on an Android device. So Xpages is really expanding the benefit for taking advantage of mobile devices. A couple of things to bear in mind is that developing for a mobile device should not be the same as developing for a desktop browser. It's a different screen resolution. It's a different screen resolution between a phone and a tablet. It's different use cases. Really, in mobile, you're looking at something to be done quickly, on the go, to open up the application, do something, and finish. Leave the application within about 30 seconds. A desktop browser, you're talking about working at it for a much longer period of time. So you need to bear that in mind, and also bear in mind that connectivity isn't going to be the same as on a desktop browser. So you may want to do more. You may want to load more content to the mobile device and run client-side much more than you would for people that are in the office. And slide transitions in the mobile controls only work within a single Xpage. So that's why you've got the single application single application page mobile design element. And hopefully now that we've got Dojo 1.8, hopefully we may be getting some more mobile controls coming in the near future with 9 as well. So the 12th labor, the final one, is was going down into the underworld to fetch the monstrous dog Cerberus. So when we're talking about going down into the netherworlds, then we're talking about inspecting tools.
Right. Nobody wants to go in and go look at code and figure out what's wrong and go debugging and that is something everybody wants to avoid. But it has to be done, and many times. So we definitely don't have time to cover all these tools that are out there, but there are some great ones out there, and a lot of them are on OpenNTF, so you could just go out there and grab them and use them right away. One of them is the Debug. Just there's a Debug toolbar, which kind of shows you things that are wrong, shows you the values. You could put your information in a log and use a log file reader. There's toolbox, you fill out information. Now within Notes, with Note 9, there's the server-side JavaScript debugging, and there's a session that went on at Connect that that if these sessions should be on Social Biz UG, right? Right, Paul, isn't that where that's located?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that should be out there, so there should be slides on that out there. But that's part of Notes 9 now. And again, debugging is not one of the things that Notes Domino did very well with a lot of things. I mean, they had the load script one, but not much else, and definitely nothing for nothing built in for traditional web. So these debugging tools out there are big help.
Also, just taking it a step further, the labors were really designed to make Hercules feel on his own. He actually got it started off as 10 labors, but he got an extra one for getting some help with Linnean Hydra. So what we're talking about here is that with Xpages, neither you nor your users are on their own. We've got loads of community blog posts, lots of books. I know there's a second edition of Mastering Xpages being written at the moment. There's lots of user groups. OpenNTF has a host of resources, and there's a Domino Designer plugin to allow you to easily import those into Domino Designer or export them out. Your users don't need to be on their own either. You can start adding in the social controls from the extension library. There's the Appathon at the moment going on for integrating with connections from Xpages. And you can build your own social plugins. What I've got a brief video here. So what I did was I took the Xpages help application and I added in this area at the top to allow people to log in at the same time. And once they're logged in, then there's a facility to start a chat with anyone who's edited that document and names in specific fields. So switching between documents, you can see it's changing. And then you can right-click and you get the various chat options there, but we can just start a chat with that person. And this brings up the same time web proxy plugin. So you can just start to chat. You can see that the person is responding. So you could actually have a chat with someone who's been involved in that document directly from the web. You don't need to go off to a separate, go off to your Notes client to same time, or go to iNotes, for example. It can also include emoticons as well. So just to quickly show that in action, I basically built that as a custom control and then deployed it as a plugin. And when designer starts responding here, this is in my XP VM. There are problems with the same time control in Notes and Domino 9, which is why I'm in the VM here. It's basically that the same time control in 9, or the same time control uses Dojo 1.7 as the highest, whereas Notes 9 uses 1.8. So you can use it by setting setting the application to use Dojo 1.7, but it works perfectly fine in 9. So I can drag this component, which I've added into the Social Business Toolkit category, so you can add it into existing categories as well. So I can drag that onto the X page. And we can see now that it's got a different prefix to it. It hasn't got XP, it hasn't got XE, it's got Paul Withers. And we've got various properties, so we can define a different database path. We can define the chat link text. We can define the dialog title. We need to specify the endpoint, which if you're used to putting the if you've looked at how you put in the same time control, then you'll see that there's some code to put into the faces config. That still needs to be done here, but we can exclude developers, exclude servers, include editors, and set field names to pull from additional fields. And of course the unit for the document to look at to find those editors or field names. So I'm still working on this at the moment, but hopefully sometime later this year, then I'll have that up onto OpenNTF as well. So just to summarize, Xpages brings a number of areas where it's considerably easier to do things than it would have been in traditional Domino for the client or for the web. There is a learning curve, but it's certainly worth it, as I'm now finding with org.opentf.domino that really the sky's the limit once you start extending things.
So we have some resources in the slides. Of course, Hercules is very popular, and you know he's a lot of references to him, whether in popular culture or in regular scholarly mythology. And there was a lot of Xpages sessions at Connect, and if you haven't jumped on the Xpages bandwagon, we certainly suggest that you do, because that is definitely the direction IBM is going, as you could tell by the amount of sessions that were at Connect. And I think there was maybe 1 or 2 on Lotus Script at Connect. So,
Paul, if you could pass control over to Howard, we can start the Q&A shortly.
Okay.
And for all the attendees, these slides will be available, and you'll be receiving a follow-up email with a link to access those.
Okay. Well, thanks, Paul and Mike. That was great. I attended your session at Connect, and I knew when I was planning, when we were sitting down planning the webinar schedule for this year, that we had to get you guys in here, because your approach to using the Hercules and the 12 waivers puts a new light on a otherwise more mundane topic. So I appreciate you guys coming here. Just as a reminder, in the WebEx interface, there's a Q&A button. If you don't see it in the ribbon at the top, there's that little drop-down arrow, and you'll see Q&A there. And that'll bring up this window, the Q&A window, where you should ask of all panelists, and then we'll verbally ask your questions to Mike and Paul. While we're taking the questions, I'll leave this slide up. A reminder about the upcoming events, the NWUG in Icon UK, one in Indianapolis, one in the UK. And Team Studio, by the way, will be at both events. And again, if you're looking to dive further into Xpages and want to get more formal training, we got a great sale going on at TLCC. Just look at our homepage and you'll see the link. So Paul, do you have a question lined up here?
I have a question from Milan. And Paul, I believe this was when you were showing in-view editing. Forgot the classical reference. But for the question is, how does security work on those edits? Are you checking for user rights in the in-view editing?
On that one, I wasn't, but you can handle all of that. You can do the check to make sure that people are authors and handle and show the. You can even set the loaded property on the. You could set the loaded property on the event handler so that the double click just doesn't work if the person isn't an editor of that document. So there's a lot of flexibility.
Okay, well, thanks, Paul. Had a question from Greg. Does the server-side JavaScript debugger work in 8.5.3?
No, that's only available with 9.
Okay, Paul, I've got a question from Bob. What charting controls were you using on that multi-data source text page?
That was just the Dojo charting. There's some posts on my blog, and it's also on the application development wiki on how to use that. So I was just using the Dojo pie chart there. I do go into a rather extensive way of doing it because I want to use a repeat control. So I actually use a JavaScript array of JavaScript objects just because you can. But you can just compute the contents in a computed field. You don't have to use a repeat control to generate the contents.
And being from the Dojo framework, that's available natively right in Notes and Domino. That's correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. We also let me just mention before we go on to another question. I know some of the folks in the Q&A were posting questions that are kind of more unique to their, figuring out an issue or something that was beyond what we talked about on the webinar. Let me remind you of 2 resources in case we don't get to your question today. First of all, Stack Overflow has an Xpages tag, if you want to call it that, where quite a few people ranging from experts like Paul on down to other folks, mere mortals, will help with Xpages questions. So definitely try out Stack Overflow. It's a great resource for asking questions. Another good resource for asking questions is the Xpages forum that IBM hosts. And so you can Google that and find it, I'm sure. And that is another great resource as well. And finally, there's a ton of other resources out there, Notes and 9 being one that has some tutorials and a number of other ones. So Paul, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question from Abhishek, and sorry about that if I messed that up. How can we use ViewScope? Now, I know that's a very open-ended question, so let me rephrase that. Paul, how do you typically use ViewScope?
I tend to use it for something that is that I definitely want to access across the whole page. If you only want it within a certain panel, then data contexts may be something to look at. You can programmatically set a data context, or you can have it calculate just on page load, or every time the page loads. Hopefully there's going to be notes in 9 coming out on that fairly soon. It may be the next few weeks, but I did one on data contexts. Yeah, view scope is really something that is specific to the whole of that X page. It can be useful. Just bear in mind that if you're binding a field, if you're binding a control to view scope, that view scope won't have a value until the first time the page is partially refreshed. After that, it doesn't set it when the page first loads, which is why in the before page load I was setting that view scope there.
Okay, thanks, Paul. We got a question from Rupinder. How about document locking when you're editing a document in Xpages? That's certainly possible. You've got access via server-side JavaScript or Java to the underlying notes APIs, so you can check whether a document is locked. You can lock it. You have to kind of code it yourself, and I'm not sure if there are any options of how to do that on the web out there, but I think there may be something coming up on that in Mastering Xpages 2nd edition, but you can handle all of that. Just one thing to bear in mind is that if you try to delete the document, you need to lock it before deleting it.
Okay, I have a question from Danilo on partial refresh. Is it possible to refresh 2 elements on the X page, and those are separate elements? They're not contained in the same element. Can you do that?
Do you want to answer that one, Mike?
Well, yes, you can, because you can chain within Xpages. You can chain elements that once something gets refreshed, then you can refresh something else. You have to write the Java, can tie into the JavaScript where there's an on-complete event that's only available through the outline, so you can refresh. So once one thing is done refreshing, you can click on, you can kind of trigger with the on-complete event, you can trigger the refreshing using Dojo. You can refresh the second element. And there have been blog posts on that, haven't there, Paul, about triggering elements?
I think so, yes.
I know Tim Triconi's done that, right? This was a while back, I think. But.
Yeah, there are methods to refresh from code.
Right.
So.
And I think, and you can also, and you might be able to just call like even a second. Well, if one depends on the other, you have to do the on-complete.
Right, but in the on-complete, you could do, I think it's under the context object.
And it's available. It's easily available through the outline. That's where you need the outline window.
Yeah.
For the design elements.
Yes, xsp.partialRefresh get you can use.
From client side.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a couple comments. David Weedy posted a link to the doc blocking snippet on OpenNTF. I put that in the Q&A. But if you don't see that or want to look for it later, just go on OpenNTF and search for document locking. I'm sure you'd find it. And then also we had some folks ask about the Icon UK link. It's iconuk.org. And the presentations from Connect are up on the Social Biz Online website.
Okay.
So if you do a search for that, I think it's Social Biz, B-I-Z Online. Paul, did you have something lined up? I think we have time for one more.
Yes, I've got a question from Abhishek. What is the dynamic view panel and how do you use it?
I think the dynamic view panel is, that's one of the ones in the extension library that basically allows you to display any view in the application, and it basically displays what you see in the notes client. I don't think it handles totals, though. I can't remember on that, but it does show icons. So that's another option that can be used to display content. Personally, I prefer either a repeat control or a data view because it gives you greater flexibility on displaying the various whatever content that you want.
Okay, thanks, Paul. We'll take one more from Bill Fox, and I believe Bill's in Calgary. Bill asked, he does full-text index searches with the data view. Is there any way to do a full-text index on the repeat control?
There's the search property, right, Paul? That,
yeah, well, you basically go into the repeat control, the source of the repeat control, whether that be computed or whatever, and usually it would be if it's a notes document collection or whatever, then you've got all the FT search methods that you have normally with those design elements, with those objects. So you just do that search not in the repeat control container itself, but in the data source. The same as what you're actually doing on the view panel. You're setting the search property, but you're setting that search property in the data area on the actual data source. You're not setting it on the view panel itself or the data view itself. You're setting it on the data.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And thanks again, Paul and Mike, for a great presentation. Just a reminder, we will send out an email with the slides, and those will have some of the links that people were asking about. And we will also post a replay of this webinar to YouTube. It will be up on the Team Studio YouTube channel, and we'll have a link to that in the email as well. So watch for that email in the next few days. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and thank my partner Paul and Talene for co-hosting this webinar. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Talene, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add. You said it all, Howard. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.